Well, a couple of years ago, me and a few others had a very awkward experience. We were looking for a new venue to host one of our Baptist youth camps, and we were having a look around one of the schools who had actually offered their services to us. And so as we drove into the main courtyard of that school, me and the other camp leaders were immediately blown away by how well the school were treating us. As soon as we drove into the courtyard, we were greeted by a number of prefects. They showed us to our very own personal parking space. As soon as we got out of our parking space, they each greeted us with a handshake and then walked us into the main door of the school. And as we walked into the main door of the school, me and kind of a couple of other camp leaders looked at each other and kind of joked with each other saying, we're getting treated like royalty here. But that was just the beginning. As soon as we walked through the front door of the school, we were greeted then by the head boy and the head girl who gave us these fancy lanyards to put over our necks. And then they started ushering us up the stairs towards this very fancy looking room. And as we walked closer to this fancy looking room, we could smell a delicious smell of food. And so we walked through the doors of that room, and as we looked up, we just saw tables upon tables of delicious hot food, scones, dessert, and all these hot drinks. And one of these little ladies who was standing behind the table, one of the catering staff, looked at us and she said, "Tuck in, this is all for you." And we kind of looked at each other again in amazement, thinking, oh my goodness, this is unbelievable. And so we start filling our faces with all this delicious food. And things were great for about 3 minutes, when all of a sudden we noticed a number of very important looking men walking through the door and into the room where we were gathered. And these men were wearing suits, and they had fancy briefcases. And as they looked at us, their faces were filled with confusion. And as we looked at them, no doubt our faces were also filled with confusion. But the confusion on their faces or our faces was nothing in comparison to the confusion on the faces of the catering staff and the prefects. But their faces quickly turned from confusion to horror when they realized what had happened. Cut a long story short, effectively, it just so happened that on the same day we were visiting the school, there was also a really important education authority meeting, and the staff had got confused between us and them, and so they actually gave us all the privileges that were meant for the members of the education authority. And so we're feeling very awkward at this point, having stolen some of these guys' fancy car parking spaces and their fancy lanyards and taken some of the food that was meant to be for them. And so we kind of had to sheepishly walk out of the room with our heads down and our tails between our legs, feeling a little bit awkward. Majorly embarrassing experience. But it wasn't just an embarrassing experience, it was also a very humbling experience. To find out that you're not worthy for the thing that's been given to you is quite a humbling experience. But you know, in the passage that we're going to read this morning, Revelation chapter 5, we actually discover that unworthiness is a problem that all of us face. Not just in an everyday sense, but in the ultimate sense before God, all of us suffer from the problem of unworthiness. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter where you grew up, doesn't matter what job you hold, doesn't matter what position you hold, all of us suffer from massive unworthiness before God. I want you to see three things in this passage. First thing I want you to see is the human problem. The human problem. John is the writer here. He's been given this great vision by God into the heavenly realm, and he notes down part of his vision for us here in chapter 5. So let's notice the first 4 verses, the human problem. John says this, "Then I saw in the right hand of him who was seated on the throne a scroll written within and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming with a loud voice, 'Who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seals?' And no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look into it. And I began to weep loudly because no one was found worthy to open the scroll or to look into it." It's really easy to get confused by all the imagery that's going on in this passage. But John has given this glorious vision into the heavenly realm. And as he gets this vision into what's happening in the heavenly realm, notice what he sees in verse 1. Firstly, he sees God, the Creator God, and he sees God in all of his glory and all of his majesty. It says that he saw him seated on a throne. This is the Creator God, the one who is filled with awe and wonder and majesty. And John sees all that glory revealed as he's sitting on his throne. But notice that God just isn't seated on his throne. Notice that he's holding something. Look at verse 1 again. Then I saw in the right hand of him who was seated on the throne a scroll. God is on his throne, but he's holding a scroll in his right hand. In this type of literature, the right hand was the hand which symbolized power and authority and prestige. And so that's to, again, convey to you that this God is glorious. He's seated on a throne and he's holding something signifying his power and his authority and his prestige, but he's holding this scroll. And you might be asking, what's the point of the scroll? Well, the scroll represents God's purpose or plans for humanity. And so this scroll is very, very important. This scroll has enormous implications for you and I as humans. It literally shows us God's unfolding purpose for his people. And so as we see this picture of glory in verse 1, pretty soon we encounter a problem in verse 2. The angel comes up with a very, very important question. Look at verse 2. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the scroll and to break its seals?" The angel asks a really important question. Who's worthy to open that scroll? We need that scroll open because it fulfills the redemptive plan of God for humanity, but none of us can open the scroll. None of us are worthy. No one is worthy. Who is worthy to open this scroll? Who is worthy to break its seals? None of us are even worthy to get close to God, let alone to take the scroll out of his hand. And that's what he discovers. He answers his own question. Who's worthy? Verse 2. Look at verse 3 for the answer. And no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look into it. The question's answered immediately for us. Who is worthy to break the seal and open the scroll? No one. No one. And notice we're not just told no one, we're told no one on earth or in heaven. Not only are humans not worthy to open the scroll, but none of the angelic beings that are pictured for us in this chapter, none of them are worthy. None of the angels, none of the elders, none of the four living creatures. No one is worthy. And you know, this is a massive problem, because that means there is this chasm between God and man. His holiness is far too great, and so none of us can even get close to him, let alone get our hands on or enact his saving purposes for our world by means of taking the scroll and unveiling it for us. This is a devastating picture for humanity. And that's why in verse 4 you can see that John is devastated. Look what it says in verse 4. And I began to weep loudly, because no one was found worthy to open the scroll or to look into it. The chasm exists between God and man, and no one is worthy to unleash God's redemptive plans and purposes for our world in order to rescue humanity and to reconcile them with a holy God. Firstly, the human problem. But secondly, notice the God-given solution. The God-given solution. Read with me from verse 5. And one of the elders said to me, "Weep no more. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has conquered, so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals." And between the throne and the 4 living creatures and among the elders, I saw a lamb standing as though it had been slain, with 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. Finally, the mood of the scene changes, because finally someone has been found who is worthy to take the scroll and open it and to break its seals. And who is the one who is found to be worthy? Well, we're told a number of things about him in these verses, aren't we? Firstly, in verse 5, we're told that he is like a lion. This is a picture of strength and power and might. But not only is he like a lion, notice verse 6. He's not just like a lion, but he's like a lamb. He's like a lamb. It's a very different picture. That's a lamb. It pictures someone who is meek and gentle. And the third clue we're given is in verse 6 that he is someone who has been slain. Someone who's got battle wounds. Someone who has been through a particularly difficult physical ordeal. And so what a comprehensive and almost strange picture we're given of this one who is worthy. 2 conflicting images. He's like a lion, but also like a lamb, and someone who has been slain. And we see the audacity that this one has in verse 7. Look at verse 7. And he went and took the scroll from the right hand of him who was seated on the throne. This is a very tense moment in the narrative. No one in heaven or on earth is worthy to enact God's fulfilled promises by taking the scroll out of his right hand. No one's even worthy to come near to this God, lest they be consumed. Yet this one, the Lion who is the Lamb who has been slain, he comes. And he is the one who is deemed worthy. And not only that, he approaches this mighty God seated on his throne filled with power and awe and glory. And what does he do? He takes the scroll out of his hand. You would expect at this moment for this individual to be consumed, to be destroyed, because who can stand before the Lord God Almighty? Is that what happens? Well, no, read with me in verse 8. And when he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each holding a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. No, this one truly is worthy to take the seal and open the scroll. And so the question is, who is this one? Who is this one that is qualified? Who is this one that is ultimately worthy to take the seal and open the scroll? Who is the Lion, who is the Lamb who has been slain? Well, it's quite clear for us, isn't it? It's Jesus. Jesus is the one who is the Lion and the Lamb. Jesus is the one who is firstly the Lion. He is strong and mighty and powerful, filled with authority. But he's also the Lamb who is gentle and meek. He's also the one whose burden is light and his yoke is easy. He's the one who has been slain through his battle marks at the cross as he sacrificed his body and blood for you. Jesus is the Lion and the Lamb, the one who has been slain. And he is the one who is able to take the scroll. He is the one who is worthy to enact God's redemptive promises for humanity. And that's why we celebrate him at Easter, because he is the one who has enacted God's promises on your behalf, so that that chasm between a sinful humanity and a holy God could be bridged by his sacrifice on the cross. This is why Easter is such a miraculous and amazing time of year, as we celebrate the Lion and the Lamb who was slain on your behalf. The human problem, the God-given solution, and thirdly, notice then the necessary response. How should you respond to this one, the Lion and the Lamb, who's come to bridge the gap between a holy God and your sinful being? Well, notice the response in the heavenly realm in the next number of verses. Starting from verse 9, it says, And they sang a new song, saying, Worthy are you to take the scroll and to open its seals, for you were slain, and by your blood you ransomed people for God from every tribe and language and people and nation. And you have made them a kingdom of priests to our God, and they shall reign on the earth. Then I looked, and I heard around the throne and the living creatures and the elders the voice of many angels, numbering myriads and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice, Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and might and honour and glory and blessing. And I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and in the sea and all that is in them, saying, To him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be blessing and honour and glory and might forever and ever. And the 4 living creatures said, Amen, and the elders fell down and worshipped. What is the necessary response in light of the one, the Lion and the Lamb who was slain, enacting God's promises to bridge the gap between sinful humanity and a holy God? The only necessary response is worship, isn't it? That's the scene that we see in heaven. Everyone is filled with awe. They sing with joy and gladness and worship of this Lion and the Lamb. And that should be your response as well. In light of what Jesus has done for you, if you're a Christian, your heart should be filled with joy and gratitude, and it should provoke unceasing worship. And so as you think about this passage, I've left a number of questions for you to reflect on in the description of this video. And I've also left a link to a song called Is He Worthy? It's a song that many of you will be familiar with, and it's a song which is really written with this chapter in mind. And so why don't you spend the time reflecting on those questions, listening to that song, and allowing it to thrill your heart as you think about Easter and what Jesus has done for us. Hope you have a great day.